Keep that in mind, my friend.
Good morning, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Friday, February 21st, 2025 at 11 a.m. So we're back from break and we have with us Commissioner Harrington from the Department of Labor, and very appreciative of you joining us, Commissioner, on such short notice.
Not a problem. Happy to be here. Apologies, trying to get everything squared away on my computer, but happy to answer any questions or support the committee any way I can.
Thank you. So I think all of the with all the issues that are happening in the federal government and with all the firings or layoffs or whatever they want to call them, the reduction in workforce in the federal government, got to thinking about how does that work on the unemployment side when those people file for unemployment, and and we're wondering, is that going to, number one, put stress on our system, and the letters that they're getting almost makes it sound like they've been fired for cause, which would put them in an adjudication setting. And I know you're already having issues with adjudication. And so I guess we turn to you and find out just how that whole process works.
Yeah, thank you. So there have been a couple different situations where we have dealt with the laying off or termination of federal employees. The current situation is a little bit different than what we have dealt with in the past, which is kind of this mass termination or resignation. But we also are being conscious and cognizant of the fact that the federal government's operating under a continuing resolution as well. So there's always that threat of a potential federal shutdown. That will also create situations where federal workers may or may not be eligible for unemployment insurance. So again, as I talk about these, maybe we'll put those in two different buckets just for the sake of helping folks understand and easily know which one we're talking about. So in terms of talking about the a situation where the employee is terminated, regardless of what the federal government puts down as the reason for the termination, we will take that claim at the Department of Labor. We will also send a form to the federal government. We have to request wages, a wage record from the federal government for these employees, although that can tend to take a lot of time. So we also do what's called affidavit wages. And we allow the individual to fill out an affidavit telling us what their wages were that they earned leading up to their termination. It will require, especially if there's a contesting of the claim, right? So if the claimant is saying that they were let go without cause or notice versus if the employer is saying they were terminated for cause, whether it be performance or misconduct, it will require the claim to be adjudicated. And again, just for a reminder for everybody, all that means is additional fact finding has to occur. So we conduct additional fact finding by getting specific questions asked by and answered by the employer and by the claimant. I think we are fully aware of the situation and the letter that some of these individuals are receiving. So we will take that into consideration as well, but they really need to be treated on a case-by-case basis and not necessarily a blanket understanding of each claim or situation. It will also depend on whether or not individuals were terminated without notice versus whether they took that early resignation or deferred resignation, where they are able to step down from their position, but their last day of actual employment is sometime in the fall. So I think we're also conscious of those situations as well, and how do we treat those types of claims when they come in. So that's one bucket of individuals, those that are terminated from their employment. And then the other bucket that I mentioned earlier is if there should be a federal shutdown and employees are furloughed. There are two types of employees usually in those types of cases. There are the employees, the non-essential employees that are furloughed and are sent home, and they don't receive pay. They might receive back pay when the federal government opens back up again. Those individuals that are sent home are eligible to file and collect benefits. The one part where this gets tricky is when the federal government opens back up, and they are paid back wages, they are required to repay the Department of Labor for the benefits they received during that time. And on the flip side, if they are essential workers, if they are required to still report to work, even though they are not receiving pay, they are not eligible to collect unemployment benefits. Again, those are federal regulations on how and when federal government employees would be eligible to collect unemployment. Happy to answer questions, but that's really the overview.
Have you been seeing some filings come in from
I'd have to check,
federal?
but not mass filings. So I would be made aware of that. There may be some here or there, but I'm not aware of any large layoffs across the state at this point. There are about 6,800 federal workers in Vermont. That doesn't include federal contractors. We don't have a lot of federal contractors, but we do have one large federal contractor, which is the Naturalization and Immigration Center up in St. Albans at the border. And that one, I have not heard of any cancellation of the contract or downsizing at this point of the immigration center.
Take me through the unemployment process. I fire somebody and then they go apply for unemployment. Do I get a questionnaire?
Yeah.
Or so no matter whether I fire them or let them go, I get a questionnaire that says, hey, they're collecting unemployment. What's going on?
Yeah,
Okay,
so
versus
correct. Yep. So if someone files a claim, we take all the claimant's information at the time they call. And then at the same time, a separation form goes to the employer and it says this individual has filed a claim. Please answer these questions. If we get that form back and there's no discrepancies in terms of what one party is saying over the other, then the claim is allowed to proceed. If we find that the employer comes back and says, the employee is saying they quit, but I believe I terminated them for cause, or if they're saying they got laid off, you're saying they quit. There's a lot of different scenarios where, and again, sometimes there's a very strong difference, and sometimes there's a very nuanced difference in what the employee versus the employer believe happened. But the employer does get the opportunity to weigh in.
so at the federal end, I mean, is there like a local person we send that questionnaire to, or does it go to the Sea of Washington?
Yes, it goes to the big object in the sky or whatever. So, what that doesn't, there's a period of time that the employer can respond by. And if they don't respond within that period of time, the claim proceeds based on the claimant's information. Again, in those situations, my guess, again, to your point, is that these are such large scale, terminations or layoffs that the federal government won't have the capacity to respond to each one. I think we will find that in most cases, the claimants, most states will proceed based on the information the claimant provides. Because the employer doesn't participate.
Thank you for your testimony here today. The question, you say there's been no mass filings yet. Do we have any indication of what the numbers might be in Vermont that either received a letter or being laid off or whatever of federal employees?
I don't, and we don't necessarily have a way to collect that information or obtain that information. We're not privy to which employees received the letter. I do know there are some because you've seen a letter, and there was an inquiry from some of our congressional delegation about a constituent they were assisting who had received a letter. So they are happening. But again, we have no insight into who they are until they contact our claimant center. But again, what we're not seeing is, tens, dozens, or hundreds of employees in a particular agency or department in Vermont at this point being let go all at the same time.
Thank you. And if I can just follow up with some personal information, I'm retired from 39 plus years with the U.S. Forest Service. So I'm a retired federal employee who has been through several shutdowns and what have you. I was deemed essential one time because I was actually inspecting a contract, and we would have been subject to liquidated damages if I'd had to, cease my duties as originally ordered. But the rest of the time, we were always made whole after. I don't recall ever being in a position where I really felt I had to file. Now, that's just personal information there. And again, as they say, past performance is no guarantee of future results. But that was my experience. I am curious, and I do want to reach out to Forest Supervisor John Sinclair and see what the situation is with my former colleagues and see what the situation really is there. But thank you for your testimony today.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. In the federal shutdowns, there haven't been many, but there have been a few since I started with the department. In each of those cases, once a deal is made, a continuing resolution or a budget is approved, then those employees have been eligible for back wages.
Questions? Bert?
Thanks very much, Commissioner. So I'm curious about what I'm hearing is that there might be some notices going out that say, hey, this is for cause. And I'm wondering what if any flex, so you take that in and you take a look at it and you wait the response of the employer. What sort of flexibility do you have in terms of interpreting that standard for cause? Are there any, federal versus state responsibilities around interpreting, whether an individual or a group of individuals are being terminated for cause or not?
Yeah, so it depends on where the separation occurs and where the burden of proof lies. In the case where, and what I was just made aware of is that the cause we're talking about in these letters is a performance-based separation. So they're indicating that for performance reasons they were let go. And so the burden in this case would be, because the employer is the separating entity, the burden of proof would be on the employer to prove that there really was cause associated with that. So just saying that they are being let go for performance-related reasons is not enough. And so we, again, would need to adjudicate or conduct additional fact-finding on that case. But the employer would have to prove that there was sufficient remediation opportunities or corrective actions, or that there really were performance deficiencies that were not corrected. And again, if we don't hear back in a reasonable amount of time from the employer, we'll move forward based on the information we have, and in most cases, just based on what I'm seeing on the front end, is that just stating it's for performance without any documentation would probably not rise to the level of a winning strategy.
But at the same time, it would still, they would be placed on hold and not receive any benefits until that was adjudicated.
Yeah, that's going to be the tough part is that they, depending on what the influx is of impacted workers, we may see a large amount of disruption in the system, especially if there are significant layoffs all at the same time. But in terms of just on a case by case basis, yeah, if there's a conflict there between what the employer and the employee are saying, then it will need to be adjudicated, and that it does take time. And there's already a significant amount of cases going through the adjudications process right now.
So that puts pressure on the department, puts pressure on other Vermonters outside of the federal government being able to secure their benefits as well.
I think, based on what we know too, I didn't mean to cut anybody off.
Oh,
Apologies.
you're good. You're good.
I was just
Go
gonna say,
ahead,
based on what we know, our team in the UI division and myself included, will be ensuring to instruct our staff, that again, that they need to take a hard look at these in the fact that they should not just be relying on what is put on the separation form, that they would need additional information to justify that this was a for cause separation.
What do you have a sense of what the reasonable time standard is for the employer to get back to you?
I can find out. Let me just ask the question.
I think it's 5 days, but
5 days ago.
And I presume a no-show would still be 5 days.
So the part of the issue is that obviously the federal government is not like any other employer. They take however much time they want to reply. And there are a couple different forms that employees, part of the issue is that we don't, every other employer in the state, submits a quarterly wage and contribution report to the department, and that includes the wages that their employees have earned. So we maintain a wage record on all employees in the state of Vermont, but the federal government's not included in that. So anytime there's a layoff, not just now, or anytime somebody is let go, we have to collect those wages from the federal government in order to adequately determine eligibility and the amount of benefits they are eligible for. Again, we take those affidavit wages when the federal government takes too long to reply, but that does create issues. And I did ask the question in terms of, I think to your point, it's less than 10 days that we allow the employer to reply.
Okay.
do you collect wages on reimbursable employers as well?
Yes, so they still submit a quarterly wage report, I believe.
Thank you, Commissioner. So how concerned are you that you have the appropriate staff to deal with what may or may not happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, we will get through it, but we certainly are not staffed to the level even to meet the current needs of the system based on the timeliness, right? So, ideally, in a perfect world, we would have the staff that allows us to administer the program within the federal time lapse amounts. And some of that is a personnel issue and just not having enough staff. Some of that is just the constant turnover. So any disruption or influx into the system just further pushes us away from trying to obtain those federal time lapse numbers, right? How fast does it take us to process a claim? And especially those going through adjudications. Roughly, I would say 25% to 30%, so a third of all claims go through some type of additional fact finding at this point. The rest, again, process without issue, and claimants receive benefits, within days of filing their claim. We'll have to look at this in terms of, whether there's any opportunity to to do a faster review of these claims, just because they're all coming from the same employer per se, with relatively the same information. We have at times been able to do that with like a mass layoff, and sometimes that can fast track adjudications. But again, I think in situations where we're going to find that the employer is stating something different than what the claimant is stating, is going to create the biggest challenge here.
Michael?
So, and I was obviously late and I apologize. And you may have already covered it. How many people have already filed?
I'll have to check on how many at the federal government level have already filed, and whether we have, so they, based on how they come in, through which agency or department. Let me ask the question.
And I did a quick Google search. We're talking about 3,800 individuals that work for the federal government.
6,800.
6,800.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, if we see a couple hundred come through the doors, that's not going to be the biggest disruption. If we see, half of those all come through the door at the same time, that will be a major disruption to our process.
Yeah. No. So I'm curious, Commissioner, do you think you folks have the authority to create guidance around what would constitute a bona fide claim of for cause in these kinds of situations?
No, it'd have to be based on I can bring in our legal counsel, but traditionally we don't have the ability to create guidance other than how it needs to be adjudicated. Again, if the federal government is saying that it's for cause because it was performance based, they will need to provide documentation and evidence to support that claim. We don't have the ability to bypass that effort.
Thank you.
Michael?
Where's the 6,800 number coming from?
I grabbed that from Matt Barowitz in our labor market information division. So I can ask him, but that's a pretty standard number he has for employment in federal government. I don't know if he would necessarily have the breakdown of which agency or department they work for.
Questions on this piece? So, Emily?
Sorry, I don't know if this has actually been fully answered, but you were saying that you're having already a delay in adjudication. Do you know how long your delay is at the moment?
Yeah, our average time right now is less than 60 days.
Okay.
It was up over 100 during the pandemic. So we've done a lot of great work with our team. We're fully staffed, and we've got some really great high producing adjudicators on the team. So we've been able to bring that down. The ultimate goal is to be within 21 days.
Okay.
Most states have not been able to hit that since the pandemic. And that's just, again, the federal government doesn't fund this program adequately for the volume that it sees and the requirements that it puts on the teams across the country. So, yeah, that's, I'd love to see us get below 30. I think we will get there in modernization, but that's not any time in the immediate future.
Thank you.
I'm just thinking out loud here. Could we create a bill that would waive that adjudication delay for federal employees?
No, that's a federal requirement. Yeah, so we'd run into a conformity issue because even during the pandemic, we were required to adjudicate those cases. Again, because there's also due process afforded to any employer. So you're essentially removing the employer's due process rights.
Anything else under this? How about what's happening with our nonprofit world that are part of grants or funding that's received from the federal government to, say, provide assistance to new Americans, refugees. And what I'm afraid of is that because they're reimbursable employers, and they let people go because they lost their funding, is that they will have the same issues that we found they had during COVID, that they're not prepared for these mass layoffs that they have to provide, and could cause significant issue with our trust fund.
I have not, I just asked the question. I'm not aware of, again, any large spike, at least in the immediate, with new claims. We do track it at the daily level. Matt verifies that data in LMI on a, every 2 weeks, new data comes out. So, but I've just asked the question to see if we've seen any increase or uptick in nonprofit layoffs that, due to federal contracts, if you will.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I guess if you could just keep us apprised of what's going on and if you start seeing these numbers start jumping, I don't know how much we can do, but I think as long as we know what's going on, and if there is something we can do, we can react quickly.
Yeah, I will bring back the concerns of the committee to our leadership team here, for sure. I don't want to be the sole person to say yay or nay, so I'll involve our legal counsel too to see what options might be available to us. Again, with the idea of how do we streamline this process as much as we can for both the federal workers, but also so that it doesn't impact the general public that might be going through the claims process as well. And so if there are things we can do, if we do see, Mr. Chair, maybe what I'll suggest is if we start seeing regular data on this coming in on a regular basis, I'll share that with you in some type of regular report, whether it's an end of week report or something like that. Again, if we're starting to see an increase, we did some of that during the pandemic, I think, with our policy committees. So again, if we start to see the snowball rolling down the hill, if you will, we'll start sharing that on a regular basis.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any other questions for Commissioner at this point? Again, thank you for very quickly being able to jump on and chat with us. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, and if you want me to come back, I'm happy to also bring the team. So if you want to dig into any of these questions in more detail, I'll have our UI interim director and our general counsel available as well. So we'll keep you informed. Always happy to come back. Just let us know when and where.
Great. Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, buddy.
Okay, so I think that's wrap for this morning. Come back at 1 and keep talking budget. So hopefully in a few days we're done with that piece of our work and move on to computer and better things. So why don't we can go off live if there's no questions.